This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
I forgot my papers at home. See, and Yvonne's gonna yell at me.
I have Mary Jane's. This is it. No, she.
Oh, wait a minute.
They're changing to zoom in or no?
No, he's over there.
6 o'clock, Chairman. Line ready to go.
We are.
Said if you needed it, you could send away.
All right, good. Take off my phone. Ringer on. Well, is that? Everybody good? Yep. Ready? Good. I'd like to convene the Board of Fire Commission meeting for Tuesday, March 28, 2023. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for being here tonight. I'd like to ask for the approval of the minutes from the Board of Fire Commission meeting held on February 28, 2023.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Chief's report.
Good evening. I just want to start with alarms, and we can get right into it. And there's a few things I want to talk about with alarms, particularly for this month. So, year-to-date, as of this time last year, we were at 1,218. Year-to-date this year, 1,093. Since our last meeting on February 28th, I normally am able to report all of the incidents that have occurred from our last meeting, which is only one day in February through now. But we went live with our new ENFR system as of March 1st, so deleting a day out, not a big deal. But more importantly, there's a lot of reports with this new system that I want to start trying to capture. And as we're integrating into it, I don't want to start giving reports on it for the first 30 days when our staff are still trying to work through some of the bugs that are there. So I don't have very specific details for you right now. I want you to, if you could, give me a month or two to kind of work through it and make sure that a lot of the intricacies that are associated with that program, we have an opportunity to make sure staff are doing it correctly. We have an opportunity to quality control it. It's completely different than what we've used before. So I can give you a total number of calls, but I can't break down necessarily a whole lot more in terms of that without knowing for sure that they're 100% accurate. We did have 12 incident responses to the highway. That number is independent of this system. We had 89 incidents in which just an ambulance responded with no fire resource needed. We had 113 incidents occurring simultaneously, but to break down anything further than that right now, I want to hold off until I can have a little more confidence in the numbers I provide. And the system is working out very well. There's heat maps we can print from it. There's a variety of reports. The one thing that this system that we went to, again, is called First Do, is very much known for is its ability to be able to produce some pretty good reports. Again, it's only as good as the data going in though, so give me some time to make sure that we've got it right.
And Chief, is the staff being trained on them individually, or are there group sessions? How are we working on that?
So the staff, we've been integrating into this since July. And we had to bring a lot of our data over. We've been having weekly team meetings with their implementation folks and trying to actually make sure that it's aligned correctly with North Haven. We had to marry it up to our CAD system so that the two of them talk, so that, you know, as apparatus are being dispatched incidents, there's export files in the background that are constantly taking place. So that took some time to work out with the various companies in IT. But yeah, all the staff have been trained. All the officers are being trained, and we're moving into the system gradually. It's not just turn the switch and we go to it all at once. But as of March 1st, we did start going to it specifically for fire reports. At this point, we haven't started with asset management tracking yet. We haven't started with apparatus check. We haven't started with inspection. We haven't started with payroll. We still are working through all of that.
And Chief, last question. Are we running the CAD system simultaneously?
CAD system always runs.
Okay,
Yeah, that's why I'm able to give you some of those numbers
Okay.
still, because those come directly from CAD.
perfect, thank you.
Just a couple of follow-ups. In terms of like getting the data into the system, is there a lot of automatic information, or are you still having to do a lot of sort of
No.
data entry?
Yeah, so not much has changed. The CAD always fed into even our previous software, the apparatus that were dispatched, the time they're dispatched, the time they arrive, the time they clear the scene, the time they're back in quarters. It captured all of that data. This is going to continue to do so. It's more so, remember that unlike, what I guess the best way to describe it is what's important to us is how an incident is coded at the end. Not so much how it's coded at the beginning. We have very few, what I would call call types to work from. We have the list down to like 15 call types. You don't really want that many, but at the end, there's hundreds of call types that it could end up being, and we want to make sure our staff are selecting the right criteria for every incident, so that there's some continuity in the data. But otherwise, it's, in terms of the fire reports themselves, not a big difference, except for probably the reports. It's everything else this program brings with it that is well above and beyond the previous software.
Okay, and you mentioned asset management, so is there any ability, and this is sort of a little bit of a leap, but I know and you had mentioned payroll too, with like budgets and as items come in, making sure, because we've had some problems with finance not necessarily putting things in the right category. Is there a way that software can help with that issue? No.
This is all different.
I mean,
Okay.
that's a whole different
That's
system.
Munis.
Yeah.
Their finance system, and I think that most recently been changed, right? I mean, you have some line items that you've been adhering to for the last 12 years that you've been chief,
Yeah.
that have now changed in finance that maybe haven't even been articulated to you.
Yeah, so the Munis system was updated recently after a long delay in getting that program updated. Not a whole lot changed for us with that, except on our side, but we use this much of Munis
Right.
compared to what finance uses.
Okay,
Regarding the budget, this time last year, we were at 76.4%. We're currently at 77.1%. And that brings us through the end of March, with only a couple days left at the end of March. Regarding permit fees, we collected just over $26,000 in permit fees since our last meeting, bringing our total to almost $421,000. We do have some staff shortages, which we can get into in detail or an executive session, but I am contending with 3 long-term sick leaves that have anywhere from 3 weeks to a couple of months. It looks like for sick leave right now that we're either just coming into the beginning of or kind of mid-cycle. And we do carry 1 vacancy at this time, which I can elaborate further on in executive session. Otherwise, you were all provided with a summary of incident types. Again, that covers from February 1st to February 28th, so that you can recognize it. That'll be the last time that you see what looks like MS-DOS, really, in terms of reporting. So you will no longer see reports like this. Give me some time and let me figure out the kind of reports that I think we should be sharing on a monthly basis, and I should have it for you by next meeting, I hope. Otherwise, you were provided with the fire marshal's report, and you can see on here the number of inspections that were conducted last month, 64 inspections last month alone, 7 different code violations in which were found, 7 were all corrected in that same month. Plan reviews, there were 7 different plan reviews that came in. Remember, we have 30 days to review plans and have them complete. There were 43 permits, there were 38 different public records requested and 38 separate inquiries at the same time. We had 2 different investigations on scene, which actually required a fire investigator to respond to the scene to investigate cause and origin on fires. You have a complete list of fire marshal activity report with you, and you were provided with the Munis report, which shows the budget. Other than that, I have a few things again for executive session, and that concludes my report.
Any questions of the chief regarding his report?
yeah, I got a couple. So the first thing is, I know that when the Board of Finance met this past month, one of the line items they cut was the volunteer association money. And the conversation in the meeting was that very little money, matter of fact, I think, and I might have this number wrong, but I think at the time Nancy said 0 had been spent out of it. And the person from finance said that they were doing an audit on the line because that number wasn't correct. So I'm looking here and it looks like $8,000 has been spent from that line item. Has this been, the budget that you're showing, has that been sort of, has the finance department gotten that straight, or is this?
So if you look at the bottom left of what you were provided for the budget, it was yesterday at 9:24 is when I ran this report, and it looks like it was corrected as of that time.
And what things come out of that budget? What would be, and where was it showing up last year? Because Nancy was also saying that last year that there was very little money spent out of it, and that doesn't sound like that's the case. It sounds like the volunteer fire associations are putting in
Sure.
requests.
Yep, so I believe Finance had asked the Board of Finance to do an audit on this and kind of figure out what was going on, and I don't know they ever had a chance to finish that audit because I spoke with Finance. What it looks like was happening was so there's sub-accounts, right? So even the lines that you see right now, the main categories, there's sub-accounts to each of those lines. The 3 volunteer association sub-account lines at some point in time began to pull from the building line and not
Okay.
from the volunteer association line. There were 3 new accounts around that same time that looks like they were created as well. So there were 6 sub-accounts that Finance had created, looks like a couple of years ago, that one was tied correctly to the volunteer association main line, and then the 3 others were sub-accounts were tied to the building line. So what really happened was the building line looked high, when in fact it wasn't as high as it was. The volunteer association line should have been reflected there.
So can finance give us an updated look at the end of last year because they're basing what they're giving in the next year's budget based on what happened last year, and if the line looked like the money wasn't being used because it was being pulled from the wrong line item, then they don't have an accurate picture of which to say that line item should be cut. So if there's any, do you know if we can get a report on that? I mean, I can check with them directly.
Yeah, you can check with Finance. I mean, I think at this point, the money was either coming out of the building line was over, it was coming out of the association line. The overall fire department budget never changed. So if you look at it, I believe that you could basically deduct around $30,000 from the building line for the last year. And you'd have an accurate number of what the building line reflected, and you would know the volunteer association line was funded correctly.
Okay.
So moving forward this year, we'll figure it out for next fiscal year. I looked through it, and there's been nothing provided to me from Finance in terms of what was cut and what was funded for next year. I had to go look today online and kind of figure it out. I think that we'll be able to make it work next year.
Okay. With that line item being cut?
Yeah, because it was just coming out of the building line, and we'll figure it out. Enough of the other lines went up where I think we can probably make it work. It's not a ton of money, and the reason I also feel this way is there's one less volunteer fire company right now. I don't yet know the status of that association. I'm certainly not going to cut off their funding and tell them, thanks for all your years of service, we're going to take your money away. That was why I never proposed it for this next fiscal year. I also don't forget, when I have my budget in December, that it hadn't been dissolved yet. So as we sit here today, I think that we can make it work next year. I don't know that association is going to continue to exist, and so it's really not as big of a cut as it is on paper.
Okay.
Any other questions? Chief, I have a couple. Take a look at the incident report. We're still looking at 36 dispatched and canceled in the route call. So I was hoping that with the additional dispatchers that we would be able to reduce that number, but it seems like that's a fairly consistent number. Can you
Yes, so-
elaborate a little bit on that?
So the dispatcher, which you're looking under line heading.
Good intent calls.
Yeah, so 36, yeah, so
Yeah.
the other one to kind of look at is dispatcher error, which is a couple lines above.
Yeah, I saw that too.
That line is really the one that we'd want to focus
Yeah.
on. The dispatching canceled en route, it could be a few things. So, it's actually what's happening, and is legitimate, is if we are sent at the same time as an ambulance, and the ambulance arrives on scene and says, because now we have direct communication with the ambulance companies in this town, unlike prior years, if the ambulance arrives on scene and says, North Haven Fire, you can clear, we have this, we're all set, then we'll clear and we'll be dispatching canceled en route. So that's a legitimate heading for those incident types.
Okay. And the other thing I was looking at is activation of fire alarms. We looked at 14 detector activations with no fires. So, and I know our fire marshals will be going out looking to inspect those fire alarms for commercial buildings that continuously have false alarms, if you will. Is that, and I don't remember what this has been on a monthly basis, is this high or is this about average?
It's about average. So it's something that's definitely worth discussing. I think it's one of the things that we probably don't give enough credit to the fire inspectors that we have enough, is that this number was incredibly higher a few years ago prior to us doing inspections.
Right.
Because we didn't have the staff to follow up on every single trouble nuisance fire alarm that would come in. I can tell you that every day that the fire marshal staff comes in, the inspectors right now, there is a shift commander's report that the prior shift commander has provided them, and it lists any trouble alarms that they went to the shift before, the weekend before, the day before, whatever it is. There's sometimes hours worth of work to do just that morning to follow up on all the fire alarms that were that had basically malfunctioned the prior shift or the prior day, as well as all the alarm systems that now may be out of service and can't now be restored. And if your building has to have a fire alarm system, then by code it needs to have that system functional. So now we need to send somebody out to that business to check on the alarm system to figure out what's going on, motivate them to repair it, and if we have to, set up a fire watch, whether that's our staff or that's somebody from there. But literally every single day, we have staff that are working, they're following up on the alarms from the shift of the days before. And so that number is actually low compared to what it would have been a few years ago prior to us doing that, because we didn't have people to go and chase down all of these different businesses that had alarms going on.
Yeah. The last question, you mentioned that our fire marshal investigator had been investigating a fire, or a couple of different fires in this last month. Do you have any idea how many hours the fire investigator had spent in that particular, in this month as far as fire investigation is concerned?
We don't necessarily track the hours. It varies. So a scene activation will normally be at least a few hours. So if we're calling an investigator to a scene to investigate the fire, cause and origin, interview witnesses, take photographs, put together a photo log, maybe collect some evidence at the scene, process that evidence, send it to the lab, take it in control of as evidence. That's hours that we're spending just on scene. Setting up lighting if it's dark, controlling the environment in terms of a perimeter, digging through and sifting through the burned material, getting in touch with the homeowners because they're not always on scene. Those are the things that can take time. So, and that's just to conduct the initial investigation. Then to file the report, and I can bring in a report and kind of X out the identifiable features of the report, if you like, for next month, so that you can see how intense these fire reports become sometimes, because they have to be able to go to court. That alone can take a few hours, sometimes a few days, in most cases a few days, I should say, to put together that report, to meet with the insurance company that wants to now go out to the scene a few days later, and meet with our investigators and determine how we arrived at our conclusion for cause and origin. one fire can tie an investigator up for 3 to 5 days. Just one fire.
Let alone a fire where we have had fatalities or
Changes
the fire we experienced on December 26th. And I want to come back to that under old business. Looking at February fires, it looks to me like we had 1, 2, 3, 5 careless cooking fires, rubbish fires, no, 6 careless cooking, a couple of rubbish fires, a furnace malfunction. So it looks like cooking fires at this point, pot fires if you will, seem to be our biggest issue right now. Certainly they were in February. So I guess we'll want to ask the public to be more cautious, and if you have things on the stove, you need to pay attention to them and not walk away from the open flame or the heat that's cooking your food, because certainly that causes a significant fire potential.
Well, and I'll take it a step further. If you don't know the addresses that you're looking at on that page, only 1, maybe 2 of them is even a single-family house.
Yeah, I see one name.
The rest of those are
Yeah.
senior apartment complexes.
Yeah.
They're restaurants. They're a variety of places, hotels. So those are high risk occupancies when you start having fires in those occupancies. Those are single family homes.
So when a call such as that goes out with numerous residents in an apartment house or a restaurant, 2 apparatus respond, 3 apparatus respond?
So a structure fire response is typically going to be 3 engines, a truck, and a rescue.
So that's all of our personnel.
It's all of
All of
your
our-
personnel plus 1 volunteer engine being dispatched if they make it out.
Okay, so that one fire, everyone's there, and we don't have any other personnel until some of those personnel are released from that scene in order to serve our residents in the event of another emergency.
There's right. So you have 3 of your, basically, of your 5 engines, assuming that all 5 are even in service, none out for maintenance or whatever else. Yeah, you're left with 2 engines and a truck at that point, that are all volunteer at that point to respond to anything else that comes in, yes.
And that's assuming the volunteers are
Correct.
able to respond, and we know historically only about a third of the time, or maybe even less than that.
Half the time that they're able to get out, yeah.
Quick question related to this. So careless cooking, does that, how do you decide what that encompasses? Like, some of these senior homes or apartments, you can have a very sensitive smoke detector. If someone burns something, it goes off, but it's not an actual fire.
We changed that.
Okay,
So in most, and that's a good question, in most of the senior complexes, if the alarm system allowed us to do so, we've changed it so that now if you set off your smoke detector and you're cooking in your kitchen, the entire building's alarm system does not go off. Because that's what's happening
Yeah.
for a longest time in similar occupancies, which was another thing that was driving up these fire alarms per month. In essence, our call volume. To the ability that we've been able to, and that code allows, so I'll display it by saying that, and if the system allows it, again, newer systems, you have a little bit more programming functionality than an old system that's, let's say, 30 years old. You can't quite do it that. So on most of our buildings in town, we've set it up where if 2 detectors in the apartment go off, so let's say it's in your kitchen, in your living room, you've created a lot of smoke, we're concerned, the building's gonna activate for a fire alarm. If, at the same time, if it's a detector within the apartment itself and a common detector, meaning like a common hallway where everybody uses, then the building will dump. What we call building will activate its alarm system. Or if it's any common hallway, it'll activate. So no, somebody cooking is, when you see Carol's cooking, they did a really good job. They smoked up their apartment pretty good because it triggered multiple detectors.
but it wouldn't necessarily be
A fire.
a fire.
No,
It could be smoke.
Yep. But it's something with burning in
Yeah,
order for it to,
yeah.
we don't call it a building fire, no. But
Okay.
we call it a Karis cooking fire,
Okay.
yeah.
I just was
So be
curious.
careful when you cook.
Well, I'm not worried about my cooking, but,
What's your bacon?
I don't do bacon.
Any other questions of the chief regarding his report?
I'm sorry, can I just get a little bit more on, I just want to talk a little bit more on the fire marshal's office, just because that has come up so many times. And I know we've talked about this before, but I just need to get it clear in my head in terms of inspections versus plan reviews and which things actually generate revenue. So can you just, under these like total inspections, there were annually 120. Are these inspections, are these things that they get billed for? Is this something that generates revenue?
No.
Okay,
The inspections, the occupancy inspections that are
listed on top.
mandated by the state of Connecticut
Okay,
do not create fees at this time.
okay.
They can, but we have not instituted it yet.
It's a possibility to do that,
In the
but we
future.
don't do it, okay. And then when you go down to the plan review, which there are 132, those are the ones that generate the revenue?
Correct.
And is there anything else in terms of the fire marshal's office that generates revenue?
No.
Okay.
You good?
Yep.
Okay. Fire Commission correspondence. Any commissioners receive any correspondence? Hearing none, we'll move on to old business of the fire department.
Old business, I got a few things that we talked about last month that I can recap on. We are anticipating a NIOSH investigation to occur in May of 2023. The leased engine continues to be in service at West Ridge. The engine that was struck on the highway is finally making some progress and working through some repairs. Again, this was taken out of service in December of 2021. And so we're hoping to have that back soon. Again, good news, parts are ready, it's going through the body shop, it's going through the paint, it's going through some other things. I'm really hoping that by next month we have it back, but it may be another 2 months still. And then, as we talked about, the delivery of our 2 new engines delayed until March of 2024 at this point. I have not, these were ordered in May of 2021. I have not been provided with anything further in terms of any delays in delivery. At this point, I don't think I would get probably an update again until summertime. So typically with the construction of new apparatus, there are 3 site visits to conduct, and we haven't done any of those yet. So as we start getting to the point that we're conducting site visits, I'll have a pretty good idea on timeline, but we haven't even made it out there for one. And that's all I had for old business.
Chief, I'd like to bring up something on the old business, and it's old sad business, actually. Obviously, on December 26th, we experienced a tragic loss of our department and lost a firefighter during an on-duty death. There's been all kinds of speculation out in the public, and I think all of us have heard of this, about how our firefighters should be, what kind of health they should be in, and whether or not they should be on active duty or not on active duty. And what was the actual happening on that particular day. I'm hopeful now that we're 3 months in, 2.5 months in, you would be able to give us an overview as to what actually transpired on that tragic day.
That's something you want me to do now or have prepared for you for next month?
If you're up to it now, or if you want to do it next month.
Yeah.
But I just think that there's so much speculation out in the public, and everywhere I go, I'm hearing different comments about what could have been, should have been, happened, didn't happen. And I think we need some clarity, and I think you're the only person that would be able to articulate that in a clear, concise manner. So if you're prepared now, fine. If you want to wait until next month, please do so.
Yeah, I mean, in light of the two different federal investigations we have, I'm gonna be a little hesitant to put a whole lot in writing.
Yeah.
But I don't have an issue at all. I've got a number of different pieces to look at that all live in different places. So if you allow me until next month to kind of look at it, be prepared to speak to the various different items that I can report on, it should be in a better position to answer a question. Because I don't want it to be just, I don't want it to be just me telling you everything that happened. I'd like there to be a little bit more dialogue in terms of key findings, let's say, what we've tried to do so far to address them, and maybe what we have to do in the future. And with a little bit more preparation, I can probably provide that to you.
I appreciate that. And you mentioned the two federal investigations that are taking place. What agencies are actually investigating?
OSHA and NIOSH,
Okay, and NIOSH is,
National Institute of Safety and Health.
And Chief, when you say key findings, you mean from your own investigation or from the OSHA investigation?
So the OSHA investigation is going to be concluding soon. The NIOSH investigation, they'll be here for 3 days in May. They'll be here for 5. They'll be conducting investigation for 3 straight days here in town. I wouldn't expect to have that report for 9 to 12 months afterwards. So it will be, I guess, internal department findings of kind of some of the things that we know went wrong that night.
all right, I guess I'm going to ask you when you feel ready to present that to us. I think that would be very enlightening for us.
Sure,
As
let's plan
commissioners.
for the next commission meeting.
Thank you, Chief.
Chief?
Can we move back for a sec just to apparatus? So you gave us the sheet a while back, and I'm just wondering where we are in terms of number of engines that are in service. We got the least, I know we got the least one, it's just that as they move around, I just want to make sure I'm clear on.
Sure, so you, the leased engine is making up right now for a few different voids. So the 2 engines that are on order, that have been on order for a long time, and the 1 engine that's been out of service in the accident. So at this point in time, we have 1 engine in service at Northeast, 2 engines in service at West Ridge, one of which is the leased engine.
And is the other one that 36-year-old one?
We are keeping that one right now as a reserve, if you will. It has no equipment left on it.
So it's not one of the 2 that you're talking about?
No,
Okay.
so I'm saying 2 engines at West Ridge, those are 2, they only fit 2 in that building. So
Okay.
it's 2 in-service engines as it normally is.
Okay.
So 1 in-service engine at Northeast, 2 in-service engines at West Ridge, 1 in-service engine here at Mono East, which is the new norm now with no volunteers here. And then we have essentially 1 spare right now. And what I mean spare is it's what allows us to filter in as we need repairs. We can take an engine and put it in place of something else and be able to keep what I just explained to you. Because what I just said to you is really only 5 engines.
Okay.
And so as we talked earlier about a simple house fire that comes in, we're going to take out 3 engines right off the bat. You only have left with 2 in town. If we start dropping any lower than that, we can't handle more than 1 incident at a time in this town. So you only have right now 1 spare engine, if you will. And I wouldn't even call it a spare, it's a reserve. It's the one that's 36, 37 years old has gotten to the point where we need to be really careful about putting that in service unless our backs are really against the wall.
All right, now I just got to follow up one thing. So we got 1 at Northeast, 2 at West Ridge, 1 at Mono East, and then headquarters? 1 at headquarters?
1 at headquarters, in service to headquarters.
Okay. And then the other question I had, I know after the volunteer staff here once it was closed, they were going out to the other 2 volunteer houses. Has that transition happened?
It's happened. They didn't, I don't have the exact number. I want to say there were 6 left. Of the 6, I want to say that 3 were reassigned. 3 decided that it was no longer for them.
Okay.
So out of the 6, we retained 3.
And so what is our total at this point?
15, I want to say.
6. How many?
Because I've had another one who's since left in the last couple of weeks, so I think 15. I don't, it doesn't change that much. I want to say we're in the high teens a couple of months ago. We're probably down to 15 now.
Okay. All right, I'm done with my questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Chief, and I'm not sure if it's old business or new business, but how are our recruits at the fire academy doing?
So we can discuss a little more in detail during executive session, but we had 1 recruit who we have separated employment with, of the 3 that we had sent, and the 2 others are doing very well.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions regarding old business? New business at the fire department?
I was going to discuss our conversion from First 2 to Firehouse, but we kind of did that already.
Okay,
From Firehouse to First 2, I should say.
okay.
So could
Sorry?
we talk about the hiring process of firefighters?
The hiring process?
Yeah.
Sure. What do you want to know, Pat?
Well, when I first started on the fire commission, I was very excited to be here. And especially when I learned that I would be working on hiring new firefighters, which I'd never done before. I'd worked on hiring people in my career, but not firefighters. So I thought there would be a procedure, process in place for what to do. And that was during a time when we had the death in the fire service. And I found out there was nothing in writing. So I decided to put something together based on my experience going through the process. And I'd like to pass it out. Mine.
Please.
Yvonne and I met to discuss some of this. I streamlined it more than, I'm sorry. It's okay. So, just one page. It's quick. So I'm hoping that after you have had time to look at this, if there are errors, to let me know. If there are omissions, please let me know. Or if everything that's here is correct, then I'd like to hear that too. Under fire service positions, where is the shift commander position?
It's the captain.
Oh.
The captain is the shift commander.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The one thing I'd like to, just having done this for a couple of years, one thing that would be helpful is to be able to get some of the information ahead of time, because I find it very hard to read the information while you're doing interviews. So I don't know if we can somehow or another put something in here where, we get the material, even if it's a couple of days ahead of time, just so that you're not trying to get the information that's been provided while the applicants are here. I'm a slow reader.
Look, I think that makes a world of sense, Jen, and, I think I apologized the last time that, we didn't have that information sent out in advance. I think that's something that we can do better.
Yeah, we're not used to having all the commissioners with the email, right?
Yeah,
So you're gonna
yeah.
give us a little bit of time.
Yeah. So,
Oh.
yeah, absolutely. So I think as we move forward, you know, Chief, you know, if we want to, do you want to address this now, or you?
We can, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it,
I think it captures most of what we do and how we do it. You know, obviously, we have the state consortium list that we draw from a pool of persons who apply for the firefighter's position. And I don't know how many municipalities participate in
it
that.
changes
Yeah, it
from time
varies.
to time. It's 12 to 15
Yeah.
towns.
And there's a list for paramedics and there's a list for firefighters.
So these are in addition to what I put on this list.
I think that's the first, is
That's
that the
the
first
first
one,
item,
A?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the consortium list.
Yeah.
Yes, all right.
And, you know, obviously our challenge has been for the most recent period of time, getting numbers of paramedics that apply for the positions that are qualified for application. You know, have they graduated? Are they just about ready to graduate? Do they have CPAT? Do they not have CPAT? You know, are they available? And most of those paramedics are we're in the process of applying to multiple fire departments simultaneously. So, you know, we need, when that list comes out, we need to act pretty quickly, depending on what our needs are. And it seems like we always need paramedics. And certainly, our experience most recently has been that on an annual basis, we have been fortunate to have, you know, 2 firefighters in our proposed budget. And we would certainly look to draw from that consortium list or from our volunteer ranks. And we have pilfered our volunteer ranks, if you will, and given the volunteers an opportunity to become full-time firefighters. So, you know, I think from the entry level, the consortium list is our primary source of applicants. In addition to our volunteers. Correct me if I'm mistaken in any way. As we move up into the officer ranks, the lieutenants, we have lieutenants and captains and deputy chiefs. The lieutenants have an examination, and the captains, that they take, and then there's a verbal interview, and is it among their peers that interview the lieutenants?
So typically for the interview is we call in officers from the departments.
Okay, and that's for lieutenants and captains, right?
So that would be under 3, that interview that
Yeah,
says
so-
chief and deputy chief would be,
Yeah, I mean, I think this summarizes the commission's role in
Yeah.
hiring.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily cover all the other
Well,
things, so
yeah.
there's other, yeah.
There's other subsets of the interviewing process,
I
absolutely.
learned from Yvonne about the
Yes,
subsets,
yeah.
but I was focusing on us.
On us, yeah. So, which, you know, so I think, you know, the process of the exam, the interviewing, whether it be outside officers interviewing for lieutenants and captains, and then the presentation of that list to us, looking at the top 3, 5, whatever the number happens to be, and then the creation of questions by the chief and deputy chief for each of us to ask those applicants, and then ultimately it's our decision as to which of those persons we promote for the lieutenant and captain role. In the chief and deputy chief roles, it's a little bit different, as we experienced most recently twice, or at least once, where we brought in chiefs from other departments to ask fact-finding professional questions that we would have no understanding of as commissioners. And then once that was dwindled down to the last 2 or 3, then we certainly interviewed those folks with questions that, again, the chief would make available to us. The interviewing of the chief, of a new chief, is an interesting process, Pat. we have, under my tenure, you know, we promoted Chief Lindisio from the outside, and Chief Januszewski from the inside. And we went through a national search when we were looking to interview for chief of the department when we hired Chief Lindisio. And we interviewed a number of persons from around the country who applied for the position. And the commission at that point saw fit to interview, I want to say there were, the finalists were the final 3 or 4, and it was pared down to 2, and then we agreed upon Chief Lindisio. When Chief Januszewski was then in the ranks as an officer, the deputy chief that was on staff at the time was, you know, in the eyes of many, the heir apparent, but certainly the department was changing and changing for a better way. And so we were looking for education, you know, experience, persons that had forward thinking, and we required you know, 5-year plans of each of the applicants, and those 5-year plans were reviewed by other senior chiefs that were called upon on a statewide level, and then again pared down to the persons who were most qualified for the role. When we selected Chief Januszewski as our chief, he moved up the ranks from a lieutenant. We did not have captains at that time. And the commission at that time felt that the skill and expertise that he brought to the table, the leadership that he had demonstrated multiple times throughout his career as a lieutenant, and his further education led us to believe that he was the right person for the right time for us to look to move the department forward. And I think the commission who chose our current chief made the right decision, because I believe that this department has advanced itself significantly under our chief, and I'm proud to say that I was part of that commission that chose you know, Chief Januszewski at that time as our chief. As we move forward, and when the time comes, and I hope it's not anytime soon, when our chief decides to move on to greener pastures.
Is there any greener pasture?
I don't know. You know, we might think he's at the pinnacle, but I think there's certainly a lofty ceiling for someone with his skill and expertise. But having said that, I think it will be a challenge for us to be sure that we're bringing a person on board, he or she, that would continue to lead our department in a forward position, and that would have the education, the skill and expertise to look to move our department ahead and build on the shoulders of what Chief Januszewski has demonstrated during his tenure. And I'm hopeful that whomever that commission is going to be will make the correct choices. So Pat, again, thank you for this. I think it took a lot, and I know your years of experience in hiring at Yale lend itself beautifully to this. And I'm hopeful that what you learned from Yvonne and hopefully from, you know, the chief in asking some of these fact-finding questions was helpful for you. And I hope what I just articulated was helpful as well.
Clearly, there are different levels, layers of hiring.
Absolutely.
And I prepared something for the commission in the event there could be other new people on that commission.
Perfect. I think it would be a great learning experience. As you know, as the newest of commissioners, you come on board with the expectations that you're going to lend your business and educational background to the skill and expertise of what is necessary here. And basically, we're a liaison between the public and the administration. You know, myself, obviously, because I'm fortunate enough to have been chosen by this commission to be chairman, I act as liaison between the chief and the selectman, first selectman, and I bring those messages back to the commission, and I bring the message from the commission to each of those persons, and obviously the chief hears it firsthand. So I think we've got a good system in play, and I think for a new commissioner coming on board that would have a game plan, if you will, a hiring plan, would be very beneficial. And as we move forward, and we talked about policies and procedures and getting the manuals up to date, and we haven't had time to do that, and I know the chief has been overwhelmed in a lot of what he had to do, but now, hopefully, that we now have 2 deputy chiefs in play and hired, our chief will be able to really be able to focus on some of the things that we have asked him to do as far as those updates are concerned. And I know we've had discussions on that in the most recent months. So, but again, thank you, Pat, for doing this, and I think it would be very helpful for future commissioners to have this as a draft.
Starting point.
Yes, thank you for that.
The only thing I'll just reference is just items 4 and 5 is going to depend a little bit on the position. If it's a union position, they won't have some of those items, so that's all. It's just worth noting.
Yeah.
A union position is not going to, the education and the experience and the training is identified in the labor contract. So those positions, we can't necessarily do anything to stipulate in terms of so obviously any external candidates, yes, including firefighter. And for number 5, you're not typically going to get letters of recommendation for somebody who's coming up through the ranks. So
Okay.
that's all, as long as we just know that there's a little bit of flexibility in some of those things,
Yeah.
otherwise it looks great.
You know, I think, and just a little bit of an aside, when we have our swearing-in ceremonies, the chief speaks about furthering your education as our firefighters that are in the ranks currently. I speak about it as well. I think it's hugely important that our firefighters seek further education, whether it be in their profession as firefighters, or certainly in the college ranks, in fire safety or whatever the educational courses might be that lends itself to their profession. And I think we see that more and more in our younger applicants that are coming on board. They have college degrees, some of them have master's degrees, some of our lieutenants have furthered their education and obtained master's degrees while they have been in the ranks as lieutenant. That has absolutely helped them for advancement, as we've seen most recently in promotions to captain. So I think we would encourage that. It's certainly not mandated, but we would certainly encourage all of our firefighters to continue to learn and to advance themselves in their profession. And I think that would be healthy for our department and certainly a benefit for our residents in this town. Anything else on that? And Pat, again, thank you very much for that draft. We appreciate it.
One more quick, it's sort of a new business, not really totally a new business, but going back to the budget and what was cut, one of the things that they took out is that administrative vehicle. Again, can you, what's the impact of that, like, in terms of us not having that on that as something that would be funded? I mean, I know there was a period of time where they weren't functioning well. You were having problems with the administrative vehicles.
They haven't, yeah, I mean, so for 6 out of the last 7 years, I've done 8 budget presentations. 6 out of the last 7, though, I've asked for a replacement admin car. They have not been funded. So for whatever reason, it's acceptable to send over police cars that have 100,000+ miles and expect the fire inspectors, and in some cases, as you saw, chief officers, to put their families inside and to use it themselves when it's no longer any good for a police officer, but it's good for a firefighter. or chief. So we are just going to, I tell you what, when the next chief's car doesn't work, you're gonna lose a chief. Not able to go to the call.
So, just to be clear, so the fire inspectors, so the admin cars are for the,
It's for everything, so they intermix depending on the car, but it's for the fire inspectors and it's for the chiefs.
okay.
Yep.
So, and how
Big
many do we have now?
At the present time, we have 6. That includes 2 police cars that were turned in. One of which we've had for, I think, 4 years. We've had.
That's the red one.
This is the red
Yeah,
one.
yeah,
And do we know how many miles it has on it? No.
yeah.
We don't, but it was high enough for the police to get rid of it 4 years ago,
Yeah.
so imagine what it has now.
Okay.
Yeah. It's also the optics. Yes, it's a vehicle, yes, they can, get from point A to point B, but is it a fire apparatus? Is it fire worthy? Is it fire department worthy, I should say? And the chief made mention last meeting that we had 2, the chief's car and a deputy chief's car both had transmission issues. So they were both out of service. So, yes, and thankfully to the police department, they had a vehicle that was sitting in the back of the lot that they brought over or we went to get. But we're not able to put, the chief is not able to put all of his equipment in the back of that vehicle in order to respond to, and to be a command officer on a command site of a major happening. Let alone have to, put his family in it. Because
My
they,
family's not going in.
yeah.
My family's not going in a police car,
Yeah.
that was no longer good for police officers, I'm telling you right now.
And they turn those cars in because of brakes, suspension, whatever it might be. So, again, I appreciate the fact that they lend them to us, but are they as roadworthy for an emergency situation? And especially when you have vehicles that need lights and sirens that need to be very visible. And if you get a used police car that might not be up to snuff and it probably doesn't have all of the new lights on them to be as visible for safety reasons, it becomes an issue for us. So I'm disappointed once again. I voiced my disappointment. And my understanding is, Jen, that and I want to call it the jaws of life, but it's called the extrication
Yes.
equipment, also was not approved in this budget. So for those of us, Jen and Pat and myself that went through this, we understand what the power is of that jaws of life, extrication equipment. That's the equipment that rips hinges from doors of cars. They have saws that cut the tops of roofs off of cars. And those pieces of equipment age and they get tired and they don't have the strength and power that they have when they're new. And like everything else, it has a shelf life. And our equipment is used and it's tired. And the chief would not have put it in the budget if it wasn't worthy of being replaced. Or certainly a new one to be there in the event of failure of the old one. So, that extrication equipment was removed. And, I think it's an important piece of equipment that needs to be on the apparatus, especially when you look at, we had 12 calls to the highway this last month, according to this month's report. And you can rest assured that extrication equipment was used a percentile of time for those 12 auto accidents that were on the highway in order to save lives, to pull people out of vehicles that may have been on fire or someone may have been strapped into their seat belt and couldn't get out of the car. So for the wisdom of the Board of Finance, they decided to cut that. Now, I don't know why, and I don't know how they had the wisdom to do so, but I'm not happy that they did.
Yeah, well, that came in as the initial proposal, I think. I think most of the capital was cut, but, I'm planning on going on April 4th and speaking to the things that I think are problematic, because this is not necessarily the budget that has to go to referendum. So that's the whole point of that hearing, and I just want to be clear about Jaws of Life. That's a very important point, but also this administrative vehicle, to me, the fact that it's used as basically a command center for, any kind of, scene where you need the chief or whoever the person is in charge of the scene being able to be able to manage the scene. That to me is a problem, because we've heard for the last couple of years that they've been in and out of service. And this is sort of is the town making the same mistake again that they have made with the apparatus, and where we are with apparatus at this point, to push this off again is a problem. And if they're not going to fund it through capital, there should be some other mechanism to make sure that we're not leaving our town at risk. So that, I just wanted to be sure that I understood
Sure.
clearly,
So,
yeah.
A couple of quick things is I will differentiate in the budget where the cars go. The police department doesn't tell you which cars are going to the detective bureau, which cars are going to patrol, which cars are going to their officers and take them home. You don't hear that. I'm not going to do that either. It's going to depend a lot on what's available at the time to be ordered and what the needs are. It can change from month to month. We do have one vehicle on order. It's been on order for a long time through ARPA funding for an admin card, but I don't know when it's going to be. But at the same time, we still have those two other vehicles that are retired police cars right now, one of which we've had for quite some time, and they all have needs, they all have maintenance issues, they all break down. I think that, we've been through this before in terms of discussing the roles of an on-call chief officer, and I want to make this very clear. There's always one on-call fire chief officer 24/7. You can look right at the CAD and it will tell you which of the three of us is on call. That's the person who is going to go in town or out of town for any incident, major incident that North Haven responds to, again, in town or out of town. I think the commission wants that to happen. I think that especially when we send units to Hamden, New Haven, Meriden, Wallingford, wherever we're going, I think that you want to make sure that you're sending a chief there to make sure that our staff is safe and that we can communicate with our staff. Because we can't communicate by radio every town we go to. So you need a chief to be able to respond, be able to kind of be the liaison, has been worded tonight, between the command established for that city or town that we're in and our units on scene. So we need vehicles, dependable vehicles, with lights and sirens, to be able to get within 5-6 towns of here. Add to that, I would hope, and it doesn't always happen, but another chief that is not on call is available to start kind of listening up and saying, all right, there's some things going on in town right now, and maybe I should be getting to town myself and start trying to figure out how we're going to cover for apparatus that are simultaneously out of town and combating a fire in another town and protecting for North Haven. If you don't have vehicles to do that, then we don't have the chiefs to be able to do that. And that's up to the commission to figure out how we're going to accomplish that. We also need more, hopefully, again, we can only put one of the three of us on call. You're talking about 3 people who have families and kids and work 40 hours a week still. You're asking them to be on call days, nights, weekends, and holidays, on top of it all when they're not on duty. Hopefully, more than one can respond to an incident, but that's not always the case. And all we're asking for is the vehicles to do it.
Yep.
That's it. On the capital, I just want to say real fast, I would ask the commission to consider with the capital. There is a bonding meeting that's scheduled for the fall, and I would advocate that the $300,000 that we're putting aside every year for the apparatus be considered for the bonding meeting. We have always purchased apparatus in this town through bonds. The one exception to that was the most recent ladder truck purchase, which we put aside $211,000, $212,000 a year, whatever it was for so many years. That was the first time we had done that. The department typically has about $300,000 of capital needs in any given year. You can look back historically through all the budgets in the last decade. The department typically has about $300,000. Pat, you know this from the Board of Finance, right? So what my concern was that if we were going to decide to structure the payments for an apparatus through capital, then I still have capital needs to buy every year. If it's only $300,000 they're gonna give the fire department towards capital, we can't just fund our obligation for a yearly payment on the 2 engines and not fund the other capital needs that we have. So I'm advocating that the fire commission consider pushing for the purchase of these 2 engines to go to the bonding meeting and free up capital for the next 5 years, because I can't keep doing it for 5 years. I can't have the Board of Finance every year saying, it's too much capital, we're gonna cut it, and then here I am, I'm cut a vehicle, I'm cut education equipment, I'm cut hose, I'm cut apparatus, I'm cut radios, because we need to pay for a fire engine that year because we decided not to put it through bonding. That doesn't seem right.
So, can you explain just the bonding, it's a meeting that the town has to decide what they're gonna bond on?
Yeah, my understanding is there's a bonding meeting coming up in the fall where it's gonna be the typical
The roads.
paving and everything
Yeah.
else.
And then, how does that, for the apparatus, how does that get on the bonding?
I think that we would have to petition to have that be included on the agenda,
Okay,
to be included in bonding versus our capital. Now, when you look at the proposed budget, it looks like the fire department's getting the most amount, out of all the departments, because we have $300,000 in there to pay for an apparatus. Whereas, as the chief just clearly articulated, if that was in the bonding section,
you wouldn't see it.
well, we're looking for
Nobody would see it.
we're looking for capital for our equipment that's absolutely critically necessary, whether it be a vehicle or cause of life or whatever else that that we request, hose, tanks, so on and so forth. So once you start looking at saying, oh my goodness, the fire department, it's getting more than anyone else is getting. Well, it's because our equipment costs more than anyone else's. I mean, fire apparatus, I don't know what a ladder truck costs today, but the last one we bought was $1.2 million. It's gotta be close to $2 million now. I mean, that's a ladder truck. Pumpers, are what, 800,000, $1 million?
8 to 9 right
Yeah.
now.
So,
They're going up every year.
yeah, when we started, they were like 550, 600,000. So, it's huge money. So if we don't start, and you started to talk about this, Pat, earlier, if we don't plan as a town to begin to put monies aside or plan to upgrade our apparatus under the bonding, so that way it's not part of our capital request on an annual basis, we're gonna always be behind the eight ball.
Yeah.
We have 45-year-old, 35-year-old fire engines here in the town of North Haven. And we're a AAA bonded municipality. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
Doesn't make sense. So I think this is something that we need to grapple with as a commission. And I'm pleased to hear you say you're going to be there on April 4th. I'm going to be there, and I ask the public to be there. Keep in mind that the fire department provides services for the public. It's not like we want to have brand new fire trucks in our garages and we don't use them, we just shine them up for parades. We go out there and deliver quality customer service for moms and dads and grandmas and grandpops and babies. And we do that every single day. And it's important for us to have the right equipment, the right personnel to deliver that service to each and every one of you. That's what we do. And we've been elected as volunteers to be advocates on behalf of the public, to advocate to the finance committee and to the senior leaders of the town to support the fire department. And I'm grateful that the administration has supported the fire department as they have. But it's catching up from 50 years. Our department started in 1967, Chief, and all those years we counted on the volunteers and never really spent a lot of money on the fire department until most recently. And Michael Frieda has supported the department with new apparatus and personnel for the most recent years. But when you look at when we started this department, we had 150 volunteers and we had 6 paid staff. We have 15 volunteers today and 11 paid staff or 12 paid staff, whatever that number is going to be. Per shift. We have less personnel today than we did in 1967 when we started the fire department.
Yeah.
How does that make sense? we have more economic growth, more economic development. We have the same number of homes in town, but we certainly have younger people moving into town. We have bigger buildings in town. We have apartment houses in town that our apparatus has to respond to. We have senior living communities, and I can attest to that. They were at our building 3 times today. So, the call volume has increased over the years, and our personnel literally has been fewer. And when we talk about fires and we need, a certain number of personnel to be there, 17, 19 firefighters, we have to depend on, our neighboring towns. But when they need help, we need to respond to them. And the other thing that is kind of interesting when you look at these 2 federal investigations that are taking place, is this the time to cut back on things for the fire department? I don't think so. And I think the general public won't think so. And I don't think you think so.
Right.
So what kind of message is that sending to the federal investigators that are investigating a fatality that we had, a few months ago? And how is this department moving forward to remedy that issue? And getting to the command car, if we have a command car that can't respond, that means we don't have a senior officer. We'll have a captain there or a lieutenant there, but we won't have a senior officer on site. And how's that being viewed? So I think there are a lot of things that we as a commission need to take a deep, hard look at and articulate this message on April 4th
Yep.
to the general public. That'll be on North Haven Public TV. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Oh, God. We went to new business, I think. Any other new
I
business?
think we're done.
Good of the department, chief.
I've nothing.
Right. Public comments, I see there's no one here in attendance. I'll entertain a motion to move into executive session.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. I'd like to reconvene the Tuesday, March 28, 2023 North Haven Fire Commission meeting to order. Are there any further comments coming before this commission? Hearing none, I'll like to announce that the next regularly scheduled Board of Fire Commission meeting will be Tuesday, April 25th, 2023 at 6 p.m. Montelese Company 282 Quinnipiac Avenue. That location may be subject to change. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
This meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.